Hey guys, I just want to take a moment to tell you I apologize for this chapter. This is not the best of the chapters. It's a little thick to get through, but I tried my best to condense it down to about 30 minutes. You're welcome. And I hope this makes sense. It's a little bit repetitive in their nature, but that's actually what the book has. So just wanted to make sure you guys knew it going into it, and good luck. In this final chapter, we're going to talk about analysis and decision making. The learning objectives for this chapter include: explain how enhanced quality should be the focus of an operations improvement philosophy. Explain a 3-step process for analyzing a restaurant or food service operation and establishing financial priorities. Describe procedures for corrective action plans. And describe basic procedures for implementing change. A successful operation maintains a high level of quality at all times because it has systems in place to build and maintain quality. There are many components to a good meal: correct ingredients, excellent preparation methods, and customer-friendly service. Consistently maintaining quality is a challenge, however. Establishments should use ongoing systems to monitor quality rather than reacting to customer-related problems as they arise. Many problems arise in busy operations because employees forget things, take shortcuts, or make other minor mistakes. Many of these mistakes can be corrected before customers are affected. However, if the causes are not identified and resolved, simple mistakes can become big problems. Therefore, a system for regularly reviewing operations is needed, and everyone must take part in it. A quality system outlines how quality processes and procedures should be implemented, controlled, and maintained. It involves 4 steps. Establish standards. Managers establish standards as they develop and implement standardized recipes, purchase specifications, food preparation sheets, and job breakdowns. These and other quality tools become the benchmarks against which food items and work procedures are judged acceptable or unacceptable. Identify defects. Things don't always go as planned, and defects or differences from established standards can occur. Successful operations manage defects by regularly identifying, correcting, and tracking them. For example, managers monitoring food products from receiving through production, and then they ensure that all standards are followed all the time. They also use effective supervision practices to note and correct employee errors, and they inspect food items before they're served. Track defects. Managers use simple note sheets to recall topics to share with employees during the next pre-shift meeting. They review the daily note sheets on a weekly basis to look for patterns of defects. If they notice recurring problems, they address them. Implement a problem-solving strategy to correct defects. One approach involves defining the problem, determining its cause and possible solutions, selecting the best alternative, developing and implementing an action plan, and documenting the process for further reference. Evaluating quality. Products should be evaluated for quality on a regularly scheduled basis. Sometimes product quality issues evolve so slowly that employees and even managers don't recognize them. Customers, on the other hand, will notice it if they've not visited the establishment for a while. Regular review of standardized recipes and food products is one way to maintain product quality. This is called spot checking. For example, the manager or chef might decide to learn how well standardized recipes are being followed. They select recipes to test and determine how to administer the spot check during shifts. A spot checking process should involve several strategies: ordering the same meal during 2 shifts using the same server, evaluating the plating, speed of production, and service and quality, noting how closely the standardized recipe was followed, observing the taste and how well the items meet expectations, determining whether the meal was the same during both shifts. A product evaluation sheet can be used to take notes about the meals used from the spot check. It's important to explain the results to the employees, including problems discovered and any changes that occur as a result of the evaluation. A close look at financial analysis. Managers must be just as concerned about ongoing financial analysis of their operation as they are about producing and serving menu items for correct quality. They might ask themselves, what would the financial picture look like if everything were ideal? They can then compare the ideal benchmark with the actual financial status to assess whether a problem exists. Managers can use this 3-step process to analyze their operation and establish financial management priorities. Step 1. Set expectations. A student scored 95 on an exam. Is the student pleased or disappointed? This question cannot be answered without knowing how many points the exam was worth. If it was worth 100 points, the score is high, but the exam was worth 200 points, the score is low. Unfortunately, some managers attempt to analyze their operation without adequate knowledge. For example, assume an establishment had a 39.6% food cost percentage last month. This means that 39.6% of all revenue was spent to purchase the food products required to generate that revenue. Should the manager be delighted or frustrated with these financial results? Just as in the example of the student exam results, the question cannot be answered without more information. How much revenue was planned and what food cost percentage was expected? Restaurant and food service managers establish financial goals in their operating budgets. The budget estimates revenue, expenses, and the bottom line. The bottom line is a planned profit or other financial goals such as to break even. This goal is expressed on the bottom or last line of the budget and the income statement. The operating budget is critical to the manager's analysis and improvement responsibilities. The best managers develop and closely monitor budgets. They revise them as business conditions change in efforts to better control financial results. No manager can predict the future perfectly, and the financial success of an operation is affected by many factors. However, an operating budget is critical. It helps managers consider future events and their financial impact. It challenges managers to recognize the importance of revenue when projecting expenses. It creates a standard against which to compare actual performance. It helps managers establish a basic menu pricing structure, and it communicates a realistic estimate of future financial results to owners so they can evaluate their investment. Most restaurant and food service operations create budgets for a 365-day calendar year that begins in January 1st and ends in December 31st. However, an establishment could budget for a fiscal year, which is a 365-day accounting period that does not necessarily begin on January 1st. For example, the fiscal year might begin on October 1st and end on September 30th. The best budgets are prepared with input from the general manager and others on the management team. For example, the chef is likely to know about seasonal variations in food cost and the amount of production labor required at projected revenue levels. The dining room manager can provide insight into service staffing, and the beverage manager can advise about beverage costs based on projected revenue. However, the responsibility to produce the final budget rests with the manager. Most managers begin the budget development process by estimating revenues because they impact expenses that will be incurred. Once they are known, profit can be calculated. It's a simple budget revenue minus budgeted expenses equals budgeted profits. The budgeting project level can be met when budgeted revenue levels are achieved and only the amounts budgeted for expenses are spent. If revenues fall short and expenses are not reduced accordingly, profit shortfalls will occur. If actual revenues exceed forecasted levels, expenses will likely increase as well. However, if the increases are monitored carefully, increased profits should result. On the other hand, if managers allow expenses to exceed the levels required to support the revenue increase, profits higher than those expected are less likely. Revenues are often estimated on a weekly or monthly basis and then combined to create an annual revenue budget. This is an effective strategy because many establishments have seasonal revenue variations. For example, an operation in a shopping mall may generate higher revenues in November and December because of holiday shoppers. Forecasting revenue is not an exact process, but several basic steps can be used. Step 1. Review revenue records from previous years. If an operation has been open for a period of time, its revenue history may help predict future revenue levels. Step 2. Evaluate internal changes. Some activities undertaken by the managers or staff can affect revenue projections. Consider, for example, a significant change in the type, quantity, and direction of marketing efforts. Improvements in server training programs can increase revenue because of suggestive selling and reduce labor costs due to increased productivity. Other activities, such as renovation, may affect seating capacity and times when the operation will be disrupted. Step 3. Evaluate external changes. New establishments that open and others that close in the same market can impact revenues, as can road improvements or construction. Economic downturns that reduce consumer spending are another example. Step 4. Estimate the impact of selling price changes. Some managers think an increase in menu selling prices automatically results in revenue increases. However, if menu prices increase and sales count decrease, revenue will decline. This is due to the law of supply and demand. This is economic beliefs about the supply of an item and its price related to the demand. Generally, as the price of an item increases, the demand for the item decreases, although the reverse can also occur. Step 5. Estimate effect of menu changes. Some managers expand or revise menu offerings to increase revenues. Sometimes these efforts are successful and there are incremental revenues. Revenues increases beyond current revenues. In other cases, short-term increases are achieved, but longer-term revenues do not increase because the new items are purchased by the same customers who had previously purchased other items. It is not possible to forecast an operation's exact revenue 1 year in advance when operating budget is developed. With practice and good information, however, some managers can attain budget forecasts that are close estimates of actual results. Budgeting expenses. After budgeted revenues are forecasted, the next step is to estimate expenses. Some costs, such as rent, remain unchanged regardless of revenues generated. Rent is what is called a fixed cost because it does not change as revenue changes. Other expenses increase or decrease as revenue changes. Consider the cost of cloth napkins. As more customers are served, more napkins are used and laundry charges are higher. The napkins are a variable cost, a cost that changes in proportion to revenues. Food, beverages, and many other examples are variable costs. Still, other costs are mixed costs. They contain both fixed and variable components. One example is labor. Some employees are paid a salary and receive the same pay if the operation is open or closed, busy or slow. Other employees are paid an hourly wage, and more or fewer waged employees are required depending on the revenue volume. Budgets should be prepared to reflect all expenses incurred by the operation. Managers recognize the need to budget for food, beverage, and labor expenses, but many other type expenses may also be incurred. Assess the actual situation. After the manager is aware of the financial expectations stated in the budget, the next step is to determine actual operating results. The results are reported in the establishment's income statement, which summarizes the actual profitability of the operation each month. The income statement reports the operation's efficiency and profitability. It is the most important financial statement for managers. It allows them to learn if they have achieved the profit levels anticipated, and if not, where improvements are needed. In many companies, managers are evaluated for promotions, pay raises, and increased responsibility based on the income statement. Income statements like operating budgets show revenue and costs in dollar amounts and as a percentage of total revenues. This is a common practice that stems from the views of many managers that revenue and cost percentages are good guides to a manager's effectiveness. There are no best income statement goals that can be used by all operations. Food, labor, and other expense percentages may be similar in some industry segments, but the financial information that means the most is the one that developed specifically for the establishment. For example, the manager of a fine dining restaurant that features tableside food preparation and high levels of personal service will spend more money on labor than they will a quick service property. What is consistent among all operations is the profit formula that the income statement details. Revenue minus expenses equals profit. If profits are too low, the manager must increase revenues, decrease expenses, or both. Information in the income statement can show managers which alternative is most likely to achieve the desired results. Analyze the variance. In analyzing the variance, the manager compares the financial plans from the approved operating budget with the actual operating results from the income statement. What should have happened versus what actually happened. This should be done on a regular basis to determine where any variance exists. A potential financial problem exists when there's a significant variance between operating budget and income statement information. A variance may be expressed as either a dollar or a percentage terms and can be either positive, favorable for the operation, or negative, unfavorable for the operation. The manager must identify the significant variances between planned and actual operating results. These are variances that represent a large difference in dollar or percentage and therefore warrant further investigation. Significant variance is an important concept because not all variances should be investigated. Given the difference of only $25 and the difficulty of estimating utility expenses, this probably doesn't represent a significant variance. Alternatively, if the manager has estimated office supply usage as $100, but the actual cost was $500, this represents a much more significant difference. It's also an expense that can probably be better controlled, so an investigation may be in order. It's important to analyze actual and budgeted results in each of the income statement's three major segments. The statement is divided into revenue, expenses, and profits. Revenue analysis. Revenues are the first area to examine when comparing actual to budgeted results. If revenue is significantly below projected levels, profit goals are likely to suffer. Also, when revenues vary from projections, variable costs will change. They will be less than budgeted if revenues are less. In contrast, when revenues fall short of budgeted levels, fixed costs such as rent and mixed costs such as labor will likely present a larger than budgeted percentage of total revenue. Another reason to examine revenues is that understanding how actual revenues has varied from budget estimates will help managers better understand actual expenses and profits. For example, if revenue exceeds forecasts, increases in operating expenses, a variable expense, relate at least partly to increased revenue levels. The impact on budgeted expenses also results from variations in revenues. Looking back at our comparison sheet, we note that the operation has still had a shortfall in both food and beverage revenue. When revenue consistently falls short of forecasts, managers must use marketing strategy to reverse this problem. Strategies can include the use of coupons, increased advertising and marketing efforts, price discounting, and promotion of specials. One of the most popular strategies used in the restaurant industry for marketing is actually what we refer to as upselling. This is the idea that we are going to provide more for the client, better opportunities for the client, more add-ons, whether it's a alcoholic beverage or whether it's a upcharge for an item added to the main item, such as maybe adding shrimp to a steak to make it a surf and turf. Expense analysis. Identifying significant expense variance is a critical part of the budget monitoring process. While managers may be limited in their ability to influence revenue, many expenses are under the direct control. Some variation between budgeted and actual expenses can be expected because, as noted, some operating expenses vary with revenue volumes. Revenues can, however, tell much about operational efficiencies. Experienced managers know that a key to understanding profitability is properly controlling operating costs. Costs and income statement and operating budgets are typically expressed in dollars and as a percentage of revenue. As seen in our comparison chart, each operating expense, such as salaries and wages, is calculated this way. However, the food and beverage percentages are calculated differently. A similar calculation would be used to determine the expense of cost of sales for beverages. Food and beverage calculations use the revenue that each generated because these cost ratios are important to total profitability. In our comparison chart, food costs are higher than budgeted at 35.1% actual versus 33.8% budgeted. Beverage costs are also higher at 28.9% actual versus 25% budgeted. Note that while total operating expenses are budgeted at 53.3% of total revenue, the actual results are higher at 57%. Specific operating expenses must be evaluated and significant variances analyzed using the budget monitoring process introduced in this chapter earlier. Note that most operating expenses increased over budgeted estimates. This item should be evaluated closely. One area of concern is that actual marketing costs in dollars and percentages were lower than budgeted. Higher marketing expenditures might have improved revenues. Note also that two fixed costs, depreciation and interest, did not vary in dollars, but produced a higher cost percentage because the fixed dollars were spread over a smaller revenue base. Profit analysis. When the actual revenue expenses on the income statement differ from those of the operating budget, the result is often a change in the net income on the income statement. Net income represents the profit made in a business. In restaurant and food service establishments, profits are also typically stated as profit percentage, which is the profit or loss expressed as a percentage of total revenue. Looking back at our comparison results, the net income for the month was $5,510 or 4.4% of total revenues. This is less than $11,696 or 8.2% of revenues that was budgeted. This relates directly to the lower revenues and, in some categories, higher expenses. The operation's inability to meet budget goals means that the budget was poorly developed, internal or external conditions changed, or the managers were simply ineffective. Regardless of the causes, corrective action plans are needed to prevent even more serious problems. Profits can be expressed in percentages and dollars. Which is best? There is a saying that managers bank dollars, not percentages. Evaluating profit dollars is important, but care must be taken. When you evaluate different scenarios, it can show that neither dollars nor profit percentages tell the whole story. Effective managers review both profit percentages and dollars when comparing their operation budget with the income statement. Budget revisions. Managers should consider their budgets active, living, breathing documents that may be subject to change. Budgets should be regularly reviewed and modified as better information replaces the information available when the original budget was developed. This is especially true when the new data significantly affects revenue and expense assumptions. Corrective action process. After significant variances between planned and expected operation results are identified, they must be managed. Managers can use a corrective action plan that involves the same basic steps described in the problem-solving model in Chapter 7. Identify problems. Effective managers recognize that it is their responsibility to address problems that hinder the attainment of financial goals. This fact may seem obvious, but some managers think that they are already doing their best and it is not possible to improve. Others, especially those with extensive experience, may believe that there is shortcuts to being successful, such as just take care of the customers or focus on food costs. This may cause them to pay attention to only part of the operation. Today's managers recognize that they must both please customers and reduce the cost necessary to do so. Managers are busy, and they can't do everything they would like to do. Therefore, they must identify the problems and then address the most important concerns first. Careful analysis of budget plans and actual operating results expressed in the income statement is an excellent way to identify financial problems. If managers identify more than one financial challenge, which should be addressed first? In other words, which is more important, controlling revenue or controlling costs? Addressing food costs, labor types, or other types of costs? Managers must make decisions and set priorities. Make decisions. After the manager has determined a problem to address, the decision-making process can be used. The following is a way that managers can reduce problems identified in the financial analysis process. Step 1. Define the problem. Sometimes problems such as lower revenue levels and increasing costs are obvious. In other times, it's more difficult to identify the problem. Consider the view of some managers that an increasing number of job applicants enter the workforce with a lower work ethic than earlier generations. Oh, that's a statement. There are probably societal, cultural, and other components of this issue that make it hard to specifically identify the problem. Most managers will ask themselves, what would the situation be like in the absence of the problem? Their answer allows them to think about the problem in a different way. Unfortunately, problems do not occur one at a time or in a vacuum. Instead, managers are often faced with several problems at the same time. They must set priorities. Step 2. Determine the cause. What can be done to address the problem? The manager should have some answers, but the employees may as well. The use of cross-functional teams can help identify potential solutions. For example, a problem about customer complaints regarding slow service could be addressed by managers, servers, and cooks, or perhaps others. Step 3. Determine and evaluate alternative solutions. Factors including cost, ease of implementation, and impact on other work processes can help evaluate the alternatives. Step 4. Select the best alternative. Often the best solution involves aspects of several possible alternatives. Step 5. Develop and implement an action plan. Employee training, purchase of necessary equipment or tools, and changes in work procedures are among the strategies that may be useful in implementing the chosen alternative. Step 6. Evaluate and document the solution. If the manager has already considered what the situation would be like if the problem no longer existed back in step 1, this becomes easier. Sometimes solutions help but do not totally resolve the problems. In other words, as a result of the decision-making process, the problem's impact is reduced. If the problem is still significant relative to others, the manager may repeat the decision-making process. Procedures for implementing change. Perhaps the analysis or corrective action process will determine that an existing procedure must be consistently used. Perhaps, however, the manager will recognize the new procedures will be necessary to keep revenue and costs in line with budget estimates. At this point, the manager must become the master of implementing change. One of the first obstacles that potentially must be overcome is that of affected employees resisting changes. Employees who are used to doing something one way may resist changes in standard operating procedures. They may be uncertain about how they will be affected by the change, or they may not want to take time to learn the new ways of doing things. They may also be concerned about the closer coaching and supervision interactions necessary as the change is implemented and evaluated. If this natural resistance is understood and addressed, the manager is more likely to be successful in the change effort. There are a number of strategies a manager can use to overcome resistance to change. All will be more effective if the manager has a history of involving employees in explaining, defending, and justifying why a change is necessary. It may also be helpful if a manager has historically been right. The situation has usually been better after the change than before it was made. There are several strategies for reducing resistance to change. Involve employees in the decision-making process. A participative management style improves the process and makes implementation easier because the decision involves the employees. In other words, the employees have a buy-in. They have vested their creative ideas into the solution and want to prove that their solution will be a good one. Inform employees in advance about changes that will impact them. Select an appropriate time to implement the change. Trying something new during an extremely busy shift is rarely a good idea. Share past successes. Review related changes that have benefited the employee and the organization. Reward employees for sharing ideas that benefit the operation and the employees. Managing change. Managers who believe in the quality management process will be leading their staff members through a plan of continuous quality improvement, or CQI. This involves ongoing efforts to better meet or exceed customers' expectations and to define ways to perform work with better, less costly, and faster methods. These managers recognize that regardless of how small a change may be, the operation is improved by any change that helps it better meet its mission and its goals. Employees working in a CQI environment will be conditioned for change, look forward to it because they know its benefits, and be active participants in it. CQI typically works from the bottom up because employees closest to the situation are likely to have improvement suggestions. Their ideas about increasing revenue and controlling costs, for example, can be very creative. In fact, the manager really becomes a facilitator. After defining the problem, he or she uses a team approach to analyze, take corrective action, and implement necessary changes. Implementing rollouts. Managers and their team who implement corrective action plans often find themselves revising policies and operating procedures. They may also add, remove, or revise menu items. The term rollout describes the process of introducing something new into an operation. Effective planning for rollouts is very important. If not properly executed, the results can impact costs and revenue, both of which could result in lower profits. Also, customer satisfaction and employee performance may be affected. Customers may be disappointed, never return, and employees may have less confidence in the managers to make good decisions. Several basic procedures are useful in implementing rollouts, including identify rollout changes, plan rollout details, consider staff training if necessary, implement the rollout, collect rollout data, evaluate the rollout data, adjust rollout if needed, and record rollout results. Managers are decision makers. Managers of restaurant and food service operations must make many important decisions as a routine part of their jobs, and their performance is impacted by the quality of those decisions. The chances of these important decisions being good ones improve when analysis and planning are done to help ensure that the implementation process will be successful. Also, analysis and evaluation after the implementation will be helpful to guide managers as future decisions are made. If, for example, the desired result is achieved, this decision might be repeated in a similar situation. Likewise, if the decision is not to yield desired results, the manager will know what did not work. Then he or she can consider other alternatives when the same or similar situation arises. That concludes the information in this chapter. This brings us to the end of the chapters in this book. However, it doesn't bring us to the end of the work involved. Upcoming are going to be things such as review and evaluations. We've got some coursework that we're going to have to do. We're going to do some actual involvement exercises. So we'll look for those coming up forward, and I will see you on the next one.